It is my distinct pleasure to speak to you this evening about one of Bermuda's most exciting and important projects in many, many years, the redevelopment of the Bermuda Airport, something which I'm sure is very near and dear to the hearts of particularly folks that live on the East End. I've chosen to have a PowerPoint presentation here because it enables me to get all the important points across in a kind of organized fashion. First, what you see here is an aerial map of the airport area. The area in yellow is the area in which the new terminal building will be. That area down below that in the white is where the present facility is. This is an artist's conception of the new terminal. It'll be one that has jet bridges where people don't have to go up and down stairs to get on and off the planes. And will have be a very modern structure, but the developers are also, of course, very keen to have the Bermudian architectural signature on it. So they'll be working with Bermudian architects to get that particular flavor there. This is where the site will be. Again, you see the existing terminal, you'll see the new terminal site, and that's how the new building will be situated on that site. This is not an architectural presentation. That will come later when you get into the details of the actual structure. I'm not an architect, so I'll try to stay out of areas in which I have no knowledge. Okay, let's get down to some basics. Many people have asked me, why do we need a new airport terminal? Well, at one level, Bermuda has only one chance to make a first impression to a first-time visitor, and that the airport is that first impression. The current terminal is not consistent with the brand Bermuda desires to portray to the world. Minister Crocker was talking about that brand to some extent, and I think we can sum up this brand as first tier, first class, and first world. That is the brand we would like to portray to the world, not only in tourism, but also in international business. Portions of the terminal, as many of you folks who are my age and older will know, date back to the 1940s. And beneath the skin of that air terminal, the infrastructure is crumbling. And the maintenance costs are rising at an exponential trend line, and therefore brings into question the need to actually have a new terminal. Now, as our sole gateway to the world, we require a number of things from our airport, but as we now know from experience, one of the critical things that we expect is for the facility to be storm resistant. I don't think any building is really storm proof, but after Hurricane Fabian, we knew in reality that the present facility we have was not really storm resistant. We were cut off from the world for a number of days. We need a facility that is less vulnerable to storm surge and wind damage. And part of the storm surge problem is the actual location of the present facility. It makes the storm surge exposure worse than where the proposed location is going to be. Now, here's an example of what happened during Hurricane Faye just last autumn. This is the terminal, this is the arrivals terminal after Hurricane Faye. So you can see it's pretty vulnerable to storm damage. I'm sure everybody knows that anyway. Okay, through the essentials of the way we have chosen to redevelop the airport. Now, after careful consideration, the government decided that any such construction project, which is a very large one for Bermuda, in the area of $250 million, in view of our current financial circumstances, basically the Ministry of Finance decided that this project had to tick some boxes of criteria objectives, or else we couldn't do it. Had to minimize the impact on an already overextended government balance sheet. Had to reduce and eliminate the real risks of overruns and delays and heavy procurement costs. Any approach also had to address the urgency of job creation by cutting the time of procurement. And any project that we approve to go forward must ensure that government gets value for money. Now, you've heard of Canadian Corporation, CCC, the CCC model. The CCC model ticks all those boxes that I just mentioned. The project is financed by the developer without increasing government debt or guarantees. Not financed by the Bermuda government, will not increase government debt. Now, CCC itself guarantees the construction project is delivered on time and on budget. Also, heavy procurement costs that were suffered by with the hospital project are mitigated. The overall procurement time is greatly reduced by about half, fulfilling the urgency requirement for the creation of jobs. The subcontracting to local contractors will engage local labor. Let me say at this point that we estimate that in the construction phase alone, the airport project is expected to create over 600 jobs, at least 3/4 of which will be Bermudian. And this aspect, the requirement for a large proportion of Bermudian jobs and using local contractors is a priority of the letter of agreement that we have signed with the Canadian Commercial Corporation, as well as with Akon. Now, CCC has selected the Akon Group as the CCC developer. Now, I want it to be clear, CCC are not going to be building this airport, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to be the overall contractor, the sort of super manager, but they're not going to be building this airport, and they're not going to be managing this airport, this construction. The company that's going to be doing that is a private company called Akon. Akon's, I think, is the first or second largest developer in Canada. Recent projects that they have completed are the new airport in Quito, Ecuador. They are also the main contractors to build the CN Tower in Toronto, and they were main contractors in building the St. Lawrence Seaway in the in the late 1950s. So they are a major and very experienced group. Now, there's a lot of talk about RFP. RFP stands for Request for Proposal. Now, to use an RFP process is the traditional, if you like, normal procedure that is used by the government of Bermuda to decide who will build, who will do any contract. In other words, putting it out to tender. Now, will this project use a traditional RFP process? The answer is no. Let's look at the purpose of an RFP process. Now, the purpose of an RFP process is, and the theory is to use the competitive bidding process to obtain fair value for money for government. The question is, has the traditional RFP process resulted in value for money for Bermuda in recent times? Let's consider the departure lounge that was built in the 1980s by a former government. As you all will recall, that was over budget by millions of dollars. Well, the Barclay Institute building, need I say more? You know, a project that was supposed to cost 60 ended up costing about $130 million. The Dame Lewis Brown Evans building, a project that was many, many millions over budget. Heritage Wharf, prices doubled from the original estimate. Ladies and gentlemen, these overruns have been paid for by your tax dollars. They're not paid for by the man in the moon. They're paid for by you and me. And so the theory behind the traditional RFP process is a great theory, but it has a very poor track record providing value for money in Bermuda. And when we looked at this in the Ministry of Finance, we said, we cannot afford to take these kinds of risks and end up having hundreds of millions of dollars of overrun being financed by taxpayers. It was a risk that I, as Minister of Finance, refused to take. So we had to look for an alternative process. Now, one of the alternative processes is called, to an RFP process, is called a fairness assessment. And that's the assessment that we'll be using here. This involves the hiring of an independent international construction company, and I have to tell you, in this case, that company cannot be Canadian, an independent company to fully examine and assess the details of the entire arrangement to determine whether or not the government has obtained value for money. And if that company does not give its stamp of approval, we will have to renegotiate the deal. That's how this works. And we're paying for this, and it's not going to be cheap. But this is what we have to do to ensure that we're getting value for money for the taxpayers and the people of Bermuda. The next issue is that we've heard people say that this is privatization of the airport. No, it is not privatization. It's got many names, depending on what side of the Atlantic you're from, but it's called a PPP or P3. In the UK and Europe, they're called PFIs. But PPP kind of spells it out. It stands for Private-Public Partnership. Now, the airport is one of the biggest assets we have in Bermuda, and the airport is a single unit consisting of assets and services. The assets themselves are at replacement value worth about $4 billion, billion with a B. Services consist of air traffic control, electronic equipment maintenance, Bermuda Weather Service, as well as security services and baggage screening. All of these services are already outsourced. In addition to that, there's the Department of Airport Operations staff. That's what the airport consists of. This arrangement will have a concession agreement. And what a concession agreement is that a company, in this case, Akon Group, will sign a lease. At this point, the lease appears to be 35 years, and a management contract. The private sector involvement in management does not mean privatization. There will be a considerable government oversight built into that contract. The $4 billion of assets will remain the property of the people of Bermuda. So this will not be privatization, as government will continue to own the assets and will have oversight of the management team. And that oversight won't be casual. It will be built into the concession agreement, be part of the contract.